Hey Outlanders, welcome to another video of the Vigor Explained series. Today I'm going to talk about the weapon overhaul. There have been many changes, tweaks and issues that we addressed in the whole system. I'm going to describe and get into the big changes and the seemingly small changes as well. I'll basically try to shed some more light on it for you. The main aim was to make the whole system more usable, smooth and logical for you players, and make the weapons distinctive from each other and basically make it more fun. Let's start with the big one, and that's going to be the weapon ergonomics. Each weapon has its own ergonomics value, which refers to the ease with which the weapon can be handled by a human. Weapons with high ergonomics are more nimble, are lighter and easier to operate, whereas weapons with low ergonomics value are a bit more clumsy and cumbersome, a little bit more difficult to control, but that goes hand in hand with an advantage in another aspects and parameters of the weapons. In more technical terms, when you're holding a weapon in your hands, the ergonomics has an impact on a couple of factors. Let's go through them one by one. Firstly, the movement speed, and that applies to all three stances. Secondly, stamina consumption, and that applies to holding breath while aiming, jumping, climbing and vaulting, and also changing stance from a lower one to a higher one. So from prone to crouch to stand. Stamina is not consumed when you go from a higher one to the lower one. Thirdly, the aiming speed, which means the transition between the third-person view and first-person aiming. And finally, animations, and that means reloading, speed of holstering and unholstering your weapon, and also speed of transition between stances, also from the way down up. What we were aiming for with this mechanic, pun intended, is a more polished, flowing, dynamic gunplay that responds to different playstyles. That's the reason why some weapons might seem a bit more different from each other than they were before. And that's because they basically are now. Every weapon is unique. The main change you might notice now is that sidearms are much more usable. It's always more beneficial to switch to a prepared sidearm than reload your main weapon. It's also wise to equip a high ergonomic weapon or to holster it completely if you're planning on covering long distances. It might be a little bit confusing at first, but let me give you some tips on how to use ergonomics to your advantage. For example, assault rifles. They are still the middle ground between the weapon categories, because they combine the good stuff from both worlds. If you like to keep some distance between you and your opponents, use covers wisely and also are not afraid to rush forward to close range, assault rifles might be the option for you. Pistols and SMGs have the highest ergonomics in the game. They are very nimble and almost don't affect your movement at all when equipped. These are best for scavengers, runners and agile and fast players with a quick reaction time who does not mind getting into close range and possible danger. Best way to use machine guns, on the other hand, is to be as static as you can. If you crouch or go into prone, you can pin down enemies even in long ranges with a considerable precision. But it might not be wise to run with a machine gun in hands across an open field. It slows you down and shooting while moving is very imprecise. In order not to swamp you with too much details, I think you can figure the other categories yourself. Just keep in mind what ergonomics affects, then take base damage, magazine size, and, for example, rate of fire into consideration, and you'll be fine. Do not worry though, there were many ways in which we addressed unwanted behavior and exploit possibilities. For example, the damage over distance calculations for each weapon, bullet behavior, and its despawning rules. Just one side note to make something clear. Crossbow bolt is the only projectile that still drops to the ground over distance. Now I'll tell you something more about damage over distance. To describe it without getting too much into detail about curves and calculations and formulas, let me just state that it's naturally not efficient to use, for example, SMGs and shotguns on long distances. Those perform best at close and middle range, where they also have the chance to outperform sniper rifles thanks to their, for example, rate of fire and other factors. We simply redesigned the damage over distance in order for it to better reflect the basic nature and purpose of each weapon and each weapon category. The next thing we completely redid is the damage calculation. I'll just say that we have adjusted, revisited, and in many cases completely rewrote the very formulas of how the damage is calculated in the system in order to improve the gameplay experience and to make it clear, logical, and understandable even though you might not even notice it. To follow up on the previous point, let me tell you some basics about penetration. Now, to make myself clear, I mean exclusively in-game inanimate objects, obstacles and materials. I do not, for example, mean armor plate or anything related directly to the player. We completely redefined the system of how projectiles travel through the space, through the obstacles, the rules of it, the outcomes, and the effects it has. There are logical differences between objects and materials as you would expect from real life. All weapons behave based on these logical properties based on their nature. In very simple and compressed terms, yes, concrete road barrier will stop a pistol shot. And also, yes, sniper rifle will penetrate through a cardboard box very easily. Now, these were the biggest changes in the system. Now, for the weapons as separate usable firearms. The purpose of re-evaluating the basic aspects and parameters for every weapon was to, as I said before, to make each category unique and make each weapon distinctive from all the others. We went through every single weapon we have in the game and tweaked and optimized its every parameter, the main ones being base damage, spread, recoil, rate of fire, and sway behavior. But let me tell you, there were many more. Now that we covered the main part, I'll go through some minor changes connected to the weapon overhaul. Since I just spoke about tweaking each weapon separately, I might state that crossbow is now deadly, silent, high-risk, high-reward weapon. Its base damage, for example, is now 115 damage. So aim well and it's one shot, one kill, or if you feel like there's someone stalking you from the bushes, better strap that armor plate on. Talking about aiming, there were also a couple of changes. We added new options for crosshair adjustment. So now you can set crosshair length and thickness on the scale from 1 to 5 in the options menu. There are 3 bigger and 1 lower types, so if you want to play with the original crosshair from before, set your slider to 2. Several weapons had also their iron sights improved. You will find the tweaked iron sights to be much more usable now, and also some scope sights were also polished for your convenience. And now for something completely different. Or not so much, maybe. You may already know that melee system was reworked, meaning both knives and also melee attacks with firearms. So feel free to bash your opponent with much more ease and effect when you run out of your ammo, and also don't forget to take a knife into your inventory when you go to an encounter, because having a knife in your inventory reduces the time of removing barricades or opening windows from the outside. You might also notice some changes in the icons. Firstly, all ammunition types have military-grade rarity now, and also all the icons of weapons were improved. Speaking of things improved, let me include also tracers, they were slightly polished, stagger effect was tweaked and tuned, and also shooting challenges were slightly improved. One of the minor tweaks also worth mentioning is that since the whole system is quite different, the shootout and elimination loadouts were changed accordingly. Okay, to sum up, Weapon Overhaul is a big deal, and let me point out that it's a completely new system. But it's a system that we believe in, and therefore I encourage you to let us know what you experienced and how did it make you feel. Our main aim with this new system is to bring as much fun to the game as possible. If you have any questions, please let us know, and see you in the Outlands.